Okay, happy Sabbath. Yeah. Today is June 24, 2017. And we are still studying about the tidings of the East and the West. And this tidings essentially shows the seven. We are studying about the seven thunders of the seven Caesars, actually the seven Caesars of Rome, right? But actually there's 10 of them, because in this 1 year there was four. In 1 year there was, during the Civil War, there was a civil war here, and within 1 year there was 4 Caesars. All these Caesars only lasted for a few months, but eventually the big one, the one that came, was Vespasian. Vespasian is very significant, because Vespasian was the father of Titus, and during this time was when Titus came and destroyed the temple of Jerusalem, right? And that signifies the Sunday law, right? Okay. The seven. What we understand is that during the time of Caligula is when the predictions was given to Paul by who? Agabus and Philip. And Agabus means locust, and Philip means the lover of horses, right? Yeah, so that signifies Islam also, right? Not only that, but he was predicting that there was going to be a dearth that was going to come in the time of Claudius, right? There's going to be a famine, all right? And they also predicted that Paul was going to be bound, right? He was going to be bound. But like the priests are going to be bound in their binding off time. That happens at midnight, right? And they were going to be taken, Paul was going to be taken to Nero. Eventually, Paul had to go and face Nero right there. Okay. So there was a prediction that was given during the time of Caligula, was predicting of Claudius and also predicting of what's going to happen at the time of Nero, right? And that's pre-midnight, because we're going to now study what's going to happen with the Millerites, the 7 times of William Miller and Samuel Snow. Okay, we did the 7 times of the Medo-Persian kings. That's here, right? To connect that with the 7 times of the Roman Caesars, you have the 70 weeks. So 70 weeks will bring you to 34 AD, and that's the time of the Roman Caesars, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So the 70 weeks connect that with the Medo-Persian kings, and the Medo-Persian kings connected with the time of the Millerites, which is here, with the 2300 days. Okay, so we have time prophecies that connects these 7 thunders, right? The 7 thunders here connects with the 7 thunders here, and the 7 thunders here connect with the 7 thunders here with this time prophecy, the 2300 days. Okay? So the time of the Millerites from 1798 to 1844. Okay, the prophetic period that they thought was 1843, but then they had to revise it to 1844. So and it's connected with the 2300 day time prophecy. Connects the 7 times of William Miller and Samuel Snow with the 7 thunders of Medo-Persian kings. Okay, all right, and it's based on it's based on Daniel 8:14. Because what was the message of the Millerites? The judgment. Jesus is going to come at the end of this 2300 days, right? Jesus is going to come, and Jesus is going to cleanse the sanctuary, right? Jesus is the high priest. He's going to cleanse the sanctuary. And
The earthly sanctuary.
they believed that this earth was the sanctuary. And they believed that Jesus was going to cleanse the earth sanctuary at the end of the 2300 days. Now because they had a mistake, and that mistake was actually covered by the hand of God, right? That mistake was covered by the hand of God. Okay, all right. So we'll do the 7 thunders of William Miller and Samuel Snow. Okay, we did this, we ended up here last week, right? Okay, we understand that the Millerites were preaching that Jesus is going to come in 1843, but then they revised it to 1844. And their understanding was based on Daniel 8:14, on the 2300 days time prophecy. Okay? Now, William Miller was the first one that first realized that Jesus was going to come based on the understanding that Jesus comes to cleanse the temple. And to cleanse the temple, it had to be at the time of the Day of Atonement. It had to be something to do with the feasts. And the feast was the feast at the time of the Day of Atonement. Okay? William Miller first wrote that in, what is this? Wednesday, May 17. Okay, let me get my notes first. Okay, let me get the notes here. Okay. All right. He first wrote it on May 3, 1843. Right? He wrote this in May 3, 1843, and then it was published on May 17, 1843. So here, Wednesday, May 17, 1843. It was published. But remember, he wrote it on May 3, 1843, and then I guess 2 weeks later it was published. And this is what he wrote. Okay, this is only part of it. Okay, I didn't put the whole thing here because it's going to take a lot of space. But this is the summary of it. The atonement was made on the 10th day of the 7th month. Right? So he says the Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month. Okay? And this is certainly typical of the atonement of Christ is now making for us. Right? When the high priest came out of the Holy of the Holies after making the atonement, he blessed the people. So will our great high priest. This was on the 7th month, 10th day. 10th day of the 7th month. This was in harvest time. The feast of the harvest was kept on the 7th month, from the 10th day to the 17th. And the end of the world is compared to the harvest. So it's got, oh wow, this has got to be the harvest. Also in the Feast of Tabernacles, in the great day of the feast, in the last day. So in the last great day, Jesus' voice will call forth the righteous dead. So he's talking about the last great day, the end of the world. It's got to be harvest. It's the 7th month. This is why it's called the 7th month movement. Right? William Miller. It was William Miller's letter. And when did he write it? He wrote it on May 17, 1843. I have it written in here. May 17, 1843. Okay. And it was published, well, it was actually written on May 3rd, 1843, was published on May 17, 1843. Okay. Now this was his letter. Brother Heinz, my health is on the gain, as many folks, well, he was sick actually. And then there was a lot of people that came to him, just like the friends of the friends of Job. And he compares himself as Job. He was afflicted. I will tell you why. If you will examine, you will find all the ceremonies of the typical law that were observed in the first month or the vernal equinox. So the feast in the spring, okay? He was talking about feast in the spring had their fulfillment in Christ's first advent and sufferings. All right? So the feast that was in the spring, which was the Passover and the waving of the wave sheaf and Feast of Unleavened Bread, that was already fulfilled at the time of when Jesus first came. Right? Do you understand that? Okay. But all the feasts and ceremonies in the 7th month or the autumn equinox can only have their fulfillment at his second advent. Do you get that? All right. So the Day of Atonement, and what else? The booths. What's the booths called?
Tabernacles.
The Feast of Tabernacles. All right. This is the feast in the spring. It's the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Right? This is the spring. Here are the feast in the autumn. Okay. It's the blowing of the trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. The Day of Atonement, they said it's got to be October. Then they say, okay, it's got to be in 1844 then. All right. Then they figured out it was October 22, 1844. At this time, they only know that it was in the autumn. So these will be typified when Jesus comes the second time. These have been typified when Jesus came the first time. Right? All right. Okay. If this is October 22, 1844, what about the Feast of Tabernacles? When will the Feast of Tabernacles be typified? When do we have to sleep in booths?
It's the second, the real second.
Right. When we run to the mountains. Then we have to sleep in booths. Just like the Jewish people, they slept in booths in the wilderness. So we have to go to our wilderness when? Yeah, when there's going to be a real wilderness, we're going to have to run to the mountains. And we have to run to the caves, and we're going to have to make... Right. So this is still in the future. But this one has happened already, October 22, 1844. The 10th day of the 7th month. All right?
So, May 17, 18... Would he publish it? May 17...
1843. Then he said, okay.
Oh, because their first prediction was April?
Right, 1844. See, right now he's still believing in the what? He was, for some reason they were still believing. They haven't gotten this yet. He was just writing this. It was just a scribble. He was writing this as scribble. Do you think this is right? It's got to be maybe in the autumn for some reason. But they haven't completely settled into that truth yet. Right. Okay. All right. Will you and Brother Bliss examine and tell me what you think of my scribble on this point? See, this is 1843. So they haven't completely... They still believe that he was going to come, remember, on April 19th. If this should be true, we shall not see his glorious appearing until after the autumn equinox. It's going to be after autumn equinox. So he wrote this on May 3, 1843. A few months more of trial and calumny, and then all will be over. I wish I could see you once more, but do not leave your work to gratify me. Mine, I expect, is done. It is with great exertion I have written this. I am ashamed to write to any but you, Brother Himes. You can and will pity the trembling hand of William Miller. Right? He wrote this in 1843. He says that the autumn feasts will happen during the time of Christ's second coming. Okay? But he was just writing this as a scribble, right? And this was eventually published, right, on May 17. Okay. So, he was the first one that wrote about it. Okay? So we put this at the time of the end, right? Because before that, it was darkness. They didn't know anything about this. And now he's going to say, okay, it's got to be the autumn. It's going to be in the autumn sometime after the autumn equinox. Right? So he's the first one. He wrote this in May 3, 1843. Okay. But then, who took up this message? It was Samuel Snow. Right? Now, what did Samuel Snow write? Now, he wrote this on April 3, 1844. So, about a year later, in 1844, April 3. Right? April 3, 1844. This was published in April 3, 1844. It appears then that the decree from which the 70 weeks and the 2300 days are to be dated must have been issued by the king some little time before the 10th month of the Jewish year 457. So the decree must have taken effect before the 10th month of the Jewish year 457. From that time, according to Daniel 9, there were to be 69 weeks, 483 years to the appealing of Messiah. It's going to be the appearing of Messiah. It has been thought by many that this period was fulfilled in AD 26, but this is a mistake. It requires 457 and 26. Now he says entire years. It has to be a full year, right? It's got to be a full year. So from spring to spring, from fall to fall, it's got to be a full year, entire year. Now he's starting to understand the fullness of the year to make 483. But as we have seen, a part of 457 must be left out of the reckoning. The time must therefore be made up by the addition of the part of AD 27. So he's starting to understand the fullness of the year. Okay? Right. He continues here. Remember, he wrote this on February 16, 1844. And it was published on April 3. Now, April 3 is only a few days before April 19. Right? The 15 years of Tiberius, which John began his ministry, commenced in AD 26. It corresponds to part of 26 and a part of 27. On the latter part then, in AD 26, in the former part of AD 27, John began his ministry. But it was after John was imprisoned that Jesus came to Galilee saying, "The time is fulfilled." This must have been, I think, the autumn of AD 27. It is certain that it was after the Passover, as we learn by comparing John. If then the 69 weeks ended in the autumn of 27, then we may expect the 2300 days to end? The answer is plain. Deduct 483 from 2300 and the remainder is 1817. So many years remain to be fulfilled in the autumn of AD 27. Then add to that date these 1817 years and we see it brings us to the autumn of AD 1844. So now he's saying, okay, right? So first, William Miller said it's going to be the autumn, it's got to be an autumn equinox. Now, Samuel Snow adds to it, okay, it's got to be the autumn of 1844, right? So they're becoming more, there's an increase of knowledge. Remember, he wrote this on February 16. If he wrote it on February 16 and it was published on April 3, what does that mean? When it's published, it's actually formalized. You know, you see what it means? Now people can read it. It's formally given to the world. People now can read it. Okay. And he based it on multiple time prophecies. On the 6,000 years, 2520, 2300 days, 70 weeks, 1290, and 1335. He used all these prophecies to figure out that Jesus was going to come in 1844. Right? All these prophecies, these were the reasons why they came to the understanding of those days. That the understanding of 1844. Because he used all these prophecies. Okay? Now this is important. Okay? Because the same reasoning will be used to figure out that Jesus actually went into the most holy place. Right? And actually, so 1844. 1843, 1844, you use the same reasoning. Right? You should use the same reasoning. Okay, so now we put this on a timeline. There's an increase of knowledge. He figured out it was autumn 1844. And he wrote it on February 16, 1844. And then it was published, so it was formalized, right? On April 3, 1844. Now look at it was April 3, 1844. It's only a few days before April 19. It was only like just before they were disappointed. But they see what happened. They first thought it was spring equinox. Then they said, okay, no, it's not spring equinox. It's what? It's the barley harvest. This is the barley harvest, but still in the spring. But before they were disappointed here, a few days before, Samuel Snow already figured it out. It's got to be. It can't be in the spring. It's got to be in the fall. All right, because here then they were disappointed. All right, so they were disappointed. In other words, the hand of God was actually over that mistake. The hand of God is now being lifted away from the mistake. Right, and the mistake had something to do with when Jesus gonna, how they calculate that, the 1844, October 22, 1844. About this time, fanaticism began to appear. Wow. Okay, after they were disappointed. So remember, after the time of disappointment, fanaticism comes. Some who professed to be zealous believers in the message rejected the Word of God as an infallible guide, and claiming to be led by the Spirit, gave themselves up to control of their own feelings, impressions, and imaginations. Now they're starting to use their own interpretation. Right. There were some who manifested a blind and bigoted zeal. Ooh, the zeal of Jehu. Denouncing all who would not sanction their course. Wow, this is like Jehu, right? Their fanatical ideas and exercises met with no sympathy from the great body of Adventists. Yet they served to bring reproach upon the cause of truth. Instead, it kind of made a bad name for all the people who were waiting for Jesus to come, because there are some people who were really fanatics. The prince of evil was losing his subjects, and in order to bring reproach upon the cause of God, he sought to deceive those who profess the faith and to drive them to extremes. So it's okay that you want to, but if you go to the extreme, you're going to be lost also. So fanaticism is used by Satan to actually make you lose your bearings as well. Right? Then his agents stood ready to seize upon every error and every failure, every unbecoming act, and hold it up before the people in the most exaggerated light, to render Adventists and their faith odious, to make it like it doesn't smell good, malodorous. Yeah. So now these people who are fanatics make the whole movement look bad. Thus, the greater the number whom he would crowd in to make a profession of the Advent faith, while his power controlled their hearts, the greater advantage would be gained by calling attention to them as representatives of the whole body of believers. So these fanatics kind of makes the whole group of people seem bad. Okay, you see this in present truth also now. There's going to be fanatics that make as if the whole present truth group is fanatics. All right. This is Ellen White. Okay. This is Leroy Froome, right? Leroy Froome is a very good historian, right? He's a good historian. Oh yeah. Yeah, of course. Leroy Froome. He's the one that made
the sanctuary.
Wow. All right. And bring in all the. He's the one that waited for Jesus. For the pioneers to all die off, and then start changing. Okay. During January, February, he had been preaching on the fall of Babylon and coming of the Lord as a bridegroom to the marriage on the 10th day of the 7th Jewish month, 1844. However, there was but little interest or response at that time. This was Samuel Snow. Samuel Snow was preaching on the 7th day of the Jewish month, 1844. There was little interest. In April, he located his family in Worcester. We went to Worcester.
They pronounce it like Gloucester, but we pronounce it Gloucester.
Worcester. It's actually Worcester.
Worcester.
It's actually Worcester. He located his family in Worcester and went to New York, where hostility had lessened concerning the preaching of the 7th month of 1844. So Worcester is famous too. We were there last week. Right. Miller's Jewish year 1843 having then expired, after 3 weeks in New York, Brooklyn, and Newark, he went to Philadelphia. Upon request of George Storrs. In May, he returned to Worcester, remaining until July 21. Then, by invitation, Snow preached that day in the large Boston Tabernacle. On the text, "Behold, the bridegroom cometh, on the 10th day of the 7th month, go ye out to meet him." July 21. This is very, very significant prophetically, right? Ellen White said that in the summer of 1844, midway, she said midway, is summer of 1844, midway between the time when it had been first thought that the 2300 days would end. It would have ended on April 19, 1844. They thought it was going to end there. And the autumn of the same year, and the October 22, 1844. So halfway, midway between April 19 and October 22, 1844, right? To which it was afterward found that they extended. The message was claimed in the very word of Scripture, "Behold, the bridegroom cometh," right? It was in the Boston Tabernacle that it was first preached by Samuel Snow. And Ellen White said it was midway. It was July 21. So July 21 is exactly midway, all right? And we know that's midnight, okay? Our studies, we've done this so many times, we know that's midnight. July 21 is midnight. And I have a picture here. This is a very famous picture of them making fun of William Miller. And this is William Miller's tabernacle, he says. His tabernacle is going to go up to heaven, and all the people are left behind, and they are all going to go to heaven, right? The grand ascension of William Miller, the Miller Tabernacle. Right. So, okay, so where do we put this? So this is April 19. This, right? That's the when they first thought that Jesus was going to. No, that's the second time that they thought. It was called the disappointment, the first disappointment. The first disappointment was April 19, 1844. And then on July 21st, 1844, was when Samuel Snow, he first preached at the Boston Tabernacle. He lived in Worcester, and he went to Boston, and he preached at the Boston Tabernacle. The bridegroom cometh. Right there. Okay. The thing about it is here. Now this guy his name is Peter Gerard Damsteed, and he wrote his dissertation on the Millerite message when he went to school in Europe to get his PhD or something like that. All right, and that book became the foundations of the SDA message and mission. And this book, he used to teach when he became a teacher in Andrews, and he taught all the seminary students using that book. All right, the foundations of the SDA message and mission. All right, this is what he wrote, and he's right. All these calculations indicated the season in which the second advent would take place. The exact days were determined by Snow through the topological argument which had been expounded by Miller more than a year before. Okay, it was in 1843, sometime in February, right? Right. Miller had shown that the Jewish feasts were types that were to be filled by Christ at both his first and the second advent. Right. According to Snow, the vernal types which had been fulfilled at the first advent were the Passover, with its antitype in the death of Christ at the Passover lamb, right? The offering of the first fruits of the harvest on the morning after the Sabbath, with its antitype in the resurrection of Christ as the first fruits from the dead, right? And the Feast of Weeks, seen as the anniversary of the Lord's descending on the Mount Sinai and giving the law with its antitype in the descent of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. However, the autumnal types, the Feast of Weeks is the Pentecost, okay? However, the autumnal types, the types of the feast that happens in the autumn, were observed in the 7th month of the Jewish year, never had their fulfillment in the antitype. The only explanation for this he found in the assumption that they were fulfilled in the second advent. It was the type of the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, which led Snow to the calculation of the exact date of Christ's return, stating that the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month, the high priest went into the most holy of the tabernacle, presenting the blood of the victim before the mercy seat, after which on the same day he came out and blessed the waiting congregation of Israel. Right? So this Jared Dempsey, he just said what William Miller understood, and then Samuel Snow took and expounded more. Right? So the main thing about this is that Samuel Snow did not contradict William Miller. This is very important. All right? This is very important. Samuel Snow did not contradict William Miller. It was an increase of knowledge, an increase of light. Okay? Okay. This is the book. This is what Samuel Snow wrote. Okay? We got to read this, because this letter was written by Samuel Snow. All right? And this letter is not actually, you cannot find in the CD-ROM. You cannot find this in the CD-ROM. You actually have to find it in the Adventist archives. It's not in the CD-ROM. Okay. Dear brethren of the Advent faith, this document which I now present you bears the mark of being genuine. If so, it proves conclusively that our Lord was crucified in the middle of the last week of the 70. Right? He was crucified in the middle of the last week of the 70. It is dated in the 17th year of the sole reign of Tiberius Caesar. Right? It's different because Tiberius Caesar reigned with his father. Who was the Caesar before Tiberius Caesar? Augustus. Okay, he reigned together. But then it was in the sole reign of Tiberius Caesar. I say of his sole reign because it was in his 15th year of Tiberius that John the Baptist began his ministry. But from the 15th year to the 17th, there are but 2 years. Consequently, there would not be time for John's ministry, and then for half of the week, amounting to 3.5 years to elapse. The difficulty is removed in this way. John's ministry began in the 15th year of the administration of Tiberius, and not of his sole reign. His administration embraced 2 years and apart, during which he reigned conjointly with his uncle Augustus. Right? He reigned conjointly. This commenced in August AD 12. 14 years from this point bring us to August AD 26, when the 15th year began, in which commenced the ministry of John, which continued to the autumn AD 27. At the termination of 69 weeks of Daniel 9, see Mark 1, 14, 15, but the sole reign of Tiberius began not far from the commencement of AD 15, at the death of Augustus. Where then will the 17th year bring us? The question is not a difficult one to solve. 16 full years must pass, and then we are in the 17th. Then add 16 to AD 15, then we have AD 31. Thus we see that the 70th year of the role of sole reign of Tiberius began about the first year of AD 31. Then let us sum up the argument. John's ministry began in the latter part of AD 26 and ended in the autumn of AD 27. Here commenced the week of the confirmation of the covenant, the establishment of the gospel as a divine system by the mighty works of Christ. 3 years and a half from this point brings us to the spring of AD 31. Basically, this is the summary of it. 3.5 years brings to AD 31 from AD 27. From the autumn of AD 27, 3.5 years bring to the spring of AD 31, when our Lord was crucified in the midst of the middle of the week. 3 years and a half more, the last half of the week, during which the word of covenant was confirmed by them who had heard the Lord, bring us down to autumn 31, when Paul, the last of the witnesses, was converted and qualified to testify to the great fundamental truth of the resurrection of Christ. That's also the stoning of Stephen. Thus was the gospel established, or the covenant confirmed, AD 34. I believe this argument is to be based on correct premises and to be perfectly sound. When then is the conclusion? It must clearly be this, that as the 70 weeks ended in the autumn of AD 34, then the remaining part of the 2300 days, i.e. 1810, being added, bring us to the autumn of 1844. And he wrote it on May 2nd, 1844. So he wrote this letter on May 2nd, 1844.
That's after the disappointment.
Right. This was after the disappointment. Okay. After some months following the first disappointment, a time setting expounded by snow aroused the attention of Millerites. Already in February 1844, on the basis of 69 weeks, terminating the fall of AD 27, he reckoned that the second advent would take place in the autumn of 1844. In May 1844, Snow calculated the end of 2300 days in the autumn of 1844 because of his view that the crucifixion occurred in the middle of the 70th week in the spring of 1831. And the 70th week terminated in the autumn of 1834. All this understanding they didn't know that well. We now know it, right? Because we've done this so many times, and we can see it was Jesus died in the middle. It was in the spring, right? In the spring of the 70th week, right? That was Jesus. That was crucifixion, right? So that way, the end of the 2300 days has to be in the autumn. So the beginning, because the beginning has to be the autumn also. So the end has to be in the autumn. Right. Okay. Right. See, May 1844. This is where Damsteed found it was May 1844. What was written? So people were finding, where is this letter about Samuel Snow writing in May 1844? They had to look and look and look and look. Finally, they found it. Right. It was not long ago that they found this. But Damsteed already knew about it, and also Leroy Froome also knew it. As early as May 1844, Snow wrote, John's ministry began in the latter. He noticed that it was in the middle of the week. It was actually the spring. Jesus died in the spring, so that way the 2300 days had to end in the fall of 34 AD. Okay? So Leroy Froome also noticed May 1844. Okay. All right. This is what he wrote. Okay. This is what Samuel Snow was writing, and Leroy Froome wrote it again. Right. I am confident from the light that I have received from God's blessed word in those glorious types which He was given in mercy for His children to understand that our King and Savior will appear in His glory in the 7th month of the Jewish sacred year. So, right, it was May 2nd, right? That's before midnight. So he actually understood it before midnight. That's how we know he had the understanding before midnight, right? This is why we have this new waymark here, pre-midnight. And we saw it in Agabus and Philip, and we saw it in Haggai and Zechariah. It was pre-midnight. There's this pre-midnight, and it happens to us too, right? So there is something that a prediction has to be made pre-midnight. The understanding of the prediction that has to be made at midnight is understood pre-midnight, right? How are you going to give a prediction at midnight if you don't understand it beforehand, right? So Samuel Snow understood it. He had a light, more light was given, and all that light that's given even unto here does not contradict what was given here and does not contradict what was given here. This is very important because a lot of people are making different understandings at midnight, what's going to happen at midnight, and that contradicts what we have learned at 9/11 and what we have learned in 1989, okay? Because there's ministries now that are giving different interpretations of what happens at midnight, and it contradicts what we have been teaching, right, in the present truth about 9/11 and the time of the end, okay? So remember, Samuel Snow started giving the understanding of what is that he's preaching here even before midnight, okay? All right. Now, this is Samuel Snow wrote again on August 14, right? August 14. All right, we're going to just go down to here. All right. And from the autumn of 8027. So he's talking about autumn of 8027, the end of the 2300 days. This 17 years reached to the autumn of 1844. The dispensation of the fullness of time will upon, it's got to be open, will upend upon us within 3 months. Wow. And he wrote this on August. Now, August 8, this is just before August 15. This is just before the midnight cry. So the thing about it is, this is another thing. This is another thing. Samuel Snow wrote something on August 8, 1844. He's talking about the fullness of time again, right? It's the fullness of time. It has to happen in the fullness of time. It's got to be a full year. So from autumn to autumn. So if it started in autumn 457, it's got to end in autumn of 1844, right? Autumn of 457 ends in autumn of 1844. And he wrote that on August 18, 1844. Snow brought out 4 points. Their correction of a previously recognized error in calculation had brought about the shift from 1843 to 1844. 70 weeks of years both began and ended in the autumn. The Mosaic tabernacle types indicate the second advent will occur in the autumn, not in the spring, but on the Day of Atonement, or the 10th day of the 7th month. Okay? All right. 4. As the Passover, crucifixion, wave sheaf, resurrection, allotted time for the Pentecost, all came on the exact days prophesied. Those came on exact days. So Snow continued, he believed the antitypical Day of Atonement will come on the exact day specified. It has to be on the 10th day of the 7th month. We got to figure out what the 10th day of the 7th month. And how did they figure it out? Obviously, using Ezra 7:9. Then our high priest will come out of the heavenly holy holies, all right, to bless his waiting people. That will be the second advent. Unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time, without sin unto salvation. The conclusive logic of this presentation made a profound impression, and practically all the encampment accepted it. Oh, this was when? This was at the midnight cry. The next day his presentation was repeated by request. This was on August 15. So he did it on August 14, And he repeated it on August 15. This was at midnight cry at the Camp Exeter meeting in New Hampshire. Right? For example, since Christ was crucified in the spring of AD 31, the midst of the prophetic week in the seven years, 3.5 years from the spring of 31, leads us to the autumn of 34. All right, right? And in this year, the specific 10th day of the 7th month coincides according to the Karaite Jewish method of calendation. Because the Karaite calendation of Jewish reckoning starts the 1844 Jewish year on April 19, right? April 19. So, if the first day of the first month, according to Karaite, starts on April 19, you can calculate the 10th day of the 7th month, and it ends on October 22nd, if the Gregorian year.
Fromm was the one who wrote that.
Well, yeah, Fromm summarized what they actually understood,
Right.
right? So Fromm wrote this, right? So Fromm, okay. This we've studied over and over again because that happens right here. Remember, he wrote it, this was August 15, 1844, but he actually, this is important, there's a pre-midnight. There's a pre-midnight here.
Midnight and pre-midnight cry.
There you go. All right. If there's a pre-midnight, there's going to be a pre-midnight cry. Because this pre-midnight cry is for the Levites.
Yeah.
This is for the priests.
How about before pre-Sunday law?
Oh yeah, there's another one.
No way.
Yeah, it's amazing because when you read this in detail, right? Now, when they presented this this is presented by Thabo, obviously.
Yeah. It was
But
2 videos.
yeah, but he did not present that there was a presentation here, August 8th. You know,
Who did?
Thabo didn't.
But who did you just find that yourself?
Yeah,
Jeff didn't present?
no, they didn't present this. But this is obvious.
It's
It's also fractals.
Yeah.
This fractal has to be this fractal too, right? If there's a pre-midnight, there's got to be a pre-midnight cry, because there's a pre-midnight cry for that's going to prepare for the Levites.
So what happened on August 8 again?
August 8th, he basically presented this over again and published it. Published it in Signs of the Times, a few days before midnight cry, just 1 week. Just 1 week before the midnight cry.
And the 15th was Exeter.
Right.
Okay. But he was preaching on August 8 already.
Yeah, he had those printed on August
Oh, okay.
8th.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. He had it printed. Okay. This is Samuel Snow again. And what did he base this on? Ezra 7, verse 8 and 9. Right? We learned that Ezra began to go up in the first day of the first month and arrived at Jerusalem in the first day of the 5th month. Right? Ezra 7:9 is how they figured this out. Okay? It's about the 70 weeks. We already know this. Ezra 7:9 is very crucial to the understanding, because without Ezra 7:9 you cannot figure out the first day of the first month. Right? And the first day of the 5th month is when they arrived to Jerusalem. And that's the midnight cry, right? First day of the first month. And then from there you can figure out the 10th day of the 7th month. You have to have the understanding of Ezra 7:9, and they understood this. Having arrived at Jerusalem, he appointed magistrate and judge and restored the Jewish commonwealth under protection of King Artaxerxes, as had been fully authorized to do by the decree of Artaxerxes. So on the first day of the 5th month, then he can start doing these things. But the decree of Artaxerxes did not take full effect until the 10th day of the 7th month. This necessarily requires some little time and brings us to the point when the restoring have been effected. The building of the street and wall commenced. The 70 weeks were divided into 3 parts: 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and 1 week. right? 7, 62 plus 1. 7 plus 62 is 69. And the last one is the 70th week right here, right? This connection shows that the 7 weeks were allotted for the building of the street and the wall. They therefore commenced when they began to build in the autumn of 457. From that point, 2300 years reached to the autumn of AD 1844. When did he publish this? August 22. Look at that. He published this August 22. All right, August 22. Okay, we're going to put that because that's the pre-Sunday law.
That's only a few days.
Yeah, it's only a few days.
After midnight, correct?
Yeah.
What?
Mm-hmm.
There's not another waymark?
Well, the waymark is going to be October 22.
There's nothing like in September.
Oh, yeah, I haven't found it.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, but we have to, we have to find all these things that he published, and he wrote and he published, But to find it, it's actually not that difficult. But it takes a lot of tedious time for me to actually go through when, more and more of when did he publish, there's, to go through this, but it's worth it.
It's okay, you have the CD-ROM.
Yeah, no, this is, a lot of it CD-ROM, no, I actually find it on the internet. Because you have to find it on the archives of Joshua Himes' Signs of the Times. What is the most important verse for the Millerites? Daniel 8:14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. The prophecy which seemed most clearly to reveal the time of the second advent was that of Daniel 8:14, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to jump to this. Miller accepted the general received view that in the Christian age the earth is the sanctuary, and he therefore understood that the cleansing of the sanctuary foretold in Daniel 8:14 represented the purification of the earth by fire at the second coming of Christ. So, William Miller, understanding was that the earth was going to be cleansed, right? At the end, based on Daniel 8:14. If then the correct starting point would be found for the 2300 days, he concluded that the time of the second advent would be readily ascertained. Okay? This is from the Great Controversy, right? Okay. The Lord showed me that the 1843 chart was directed by his hand, and that no part of it should be altered, and that the figures were as he wanted them, that his hand was over and hid a mistake. But to calculate the end of 2300 days, they calculate it was 1843. Even then they were wrong. They calculated October 22, 1844. The date was right, but the understanding was incorrect. So there was still, the hand of the Lord was hiding a mistake, right? What mistake was it? I saw the people of God joyful in expectation, looking for their Lord. But God designed to prove them. His hand covered a mistake. So the mistake was designed by God, right? It's not like, oh well, they made a mistake, so they're wrong. No, it's a designed cover-up, right? He covered a mistake in the reckoning of the prophetic periods. One mistake made a mistake in reckoning more than one prophetic periods, the end of the more than one prophetic period. Those who were looking for their Lord did not discover this mistake, and the most learned men who opposed the time also failed to see it. Even those who were outside did not even see it. Those who were inside didn't see it, let alone those who are outside. Those who weren't studying as much, they didn't even see it. God designed, it was a design cover-up of a mistake. That his people should meet with a disappointment. He wanted them to be disappointed. Why?
To
Separate. To separate the wheat from the, right, to separate the wheat from the chaff. Yeah. The time passed, and those who had overlooked with joyful expectation for the Savior were sad and disheartened, while those who had not loved the appearing of Jesus, see, they had not loved the appearing of Jesus. They were just afraid. They were just afraid of the judgment, right? It's not because they loved that Jesus was going to come. As a matter of fact, they said, oh, if possible, just delay it a little bit more. But embrace the message through fear. We're pleased that he did not come at the time of expectation. What did they want to do? They want to push it backward. Remember, people who are going to oppose this message want to push it backwards. It's always pushing it backwards. Right? Their profession had not affected the heart and purified the life. The passing of time was well calculated to reveal such hearts. Right? So when the disappointment comes, it will reveal their hearts. They want to push it backwards. They actually just followed because of fear. And they did not love the appearing of Christ. They wished they would be, they still had some sin that they wanted to still hang on to. They were the first to turn and ridicule the sorrowful, disappointed ones who really loved the appearing of their Savior. I saw the wisdom of God in proving his people and giving them a searching test to discover those who would shrink and turn back in the hour of trial. Right? Okay. Jesus and the whole of heaven host looked with sympathy and love upon those who had with sweet expectation longed to see him whom their souls loved. Angels were hovering around them to sustain them in the hour of their trial. Those who had neglected to receive the heavenly messages were left in darkness, and God's anger was kindled against them because they would not receive the light which he had sent them from heaven. Those faithful disappointed ones who could not understand why their Lord did not come were not left in darkness. Again, they were led to their Bibles to search the prophetic periods. The hand of the Lord was removed from the figures, and the mistake was explained. They saw that the prophetic periods reached to 1844, and the same evidence, it's the same evidence, right? It's not a different evidence now. It's the same evidence. It's the 2520, it's the daily, it's the 1290. All those evidences were used to figure out 1843. The same evidence was used to figure out 1844, right? So you can't use a different line of evidence. It was just that a mistake, but they used the same evidence to figure out a different day now, right? Which they had presented to show the prophetic periods close in 1844, proved that they would terminate in 1844. 1843, same evidence, but now the mistake was found, but they used the same evidence to figure out it was 1844. Okay? So here, there's the hand was holding, was covering a mistake.
You just put a hand there. Right?
I did. I put a hand right there.
Is that your
See, I put a hand right there. Right? It was the hand.
Wow.
And the hand was removed. Okay? It revealed 457. Then they understood that it was autumn 457.
So the defining factor was autumn versus spring.
Autumn versus spring. So it was the fullness of the year.
That's the 70 weeks.
Right, of the 70 weeks.
70th.
So from the 70th week, the end of the 70 weeks end in the autumn. So the beginning of the 70 weeks has to be in the autumn. So the beginning of the 2300 has to be in autumn. So the end has to be in the autumn, right? Because the end of the 70 weeks is in the autumn.
And that's based on Ezra 7.
Right. Put that together with Ezra 7:9. Then you know the first day of the first month. That way you can figure out the 10th day of the 7th month, right? And put that together with the fact that the autumn feasts will have an antitypical fulfillment in the second advent of Christ, right? Yeah, because the 10th day of the 7th month has not received its antitypical fulfillment yet, right? Yeah. They said, in 1843, they said, you know what? There's no anti-typical Day of Atonement fulfillment yet, right? Because the Passover was fulfilled already. The Day of Unleavened Bread was fulfilled already. The wave sheaf was fulfilled already. The Pentecost is already fulfilled. But the Day of Atonement has not been fulfilled yet for them at that time until October 22, 1844. It has to be a specific date, right?
How about when we used to say that the 0 year? Where does that fit in? Does it not fit in anymore?
Well, the 0 year was actually kind of an easy way to figure this out. Just kind of like make it,
43 to 44.
Yeah, 43, 44. But it's very simple. It's too simplified. It's too simple.
It doesn't
No.
support any of the writings. Though.
No, it doesn't.
Because the pioneers are very clear on how.
Oh,
they say add a 0.
No.
Take away 1.
Because the 0 year is actually for us when we were in nominal, just to try to figure it out.
In the nominals, then you can go into the writings.
Yeah, no. To understand it, it's a lot more complicated. It's very complicated to figure this out, right?
It's a disgrace if you say 0.
No, it's not the year 0.
It's a disgrace if you just say.
Because it's too simplified. No, it's too simple. It's not the year 0. It's the fullness of the year. It's the Cariat reckoning. It's the spring to autumn. It's the anti-typical fulfillment of the autumn feasts. All of those. For them to figure out it was in the autumn of 1844. The mistake, right?
The
That
0
mistake.
is just solving the number,
Yeah.
but there's no
Yeah.
solving the reason.
Solving the reason.
Behind it,
The
right?
reason behind it.
How did they come to that
Yeah.
conclusion? It's not really, I don't think 0.
It's not of the year 0.
It's not
Yes.
0 at all.
You never actually explain it by saying it's year 0.
Right.
They're saying 1 year, that's right, but 0 has no.
No,
That's nothing at all.
no.
Nothing.
That means nothing.
It's right. You're right.
The
Absolutely.
reason.
It's not the real reason. Okay? It's not the real
Just
reason.
solving the number.
It's the 70 weeks. It's the 457.
So the hand was. So what were the prophetic periods that was wrong then? This 1843 right here. This 1843 right here and 1843. So the 2520 and the 2300, 1843. So these prophetic numbers ending was wrong. But it's not that the 2520 and the 2300 were wrong. Right? It's because the understanding of 457 was wrong. Right? So that was the mistake right there, that the understanding of the fullness of the year, 457. Because this 1843 down here, these are not wrong. Right? The 1335 still ends in 1843. Because that's when 1843 touches 1844. Okay? Right, we did that. Okay.
But they didn't use 457.
Right, because it does not use 457.
Those up there.
Right. These use 457 and then 20. Not these. This 2520 doesn't depend on 457, but the 2300 days depends on 457. Right. Okay. So the mistake, there was one mistake. So if there's one mistake in the time of the Millerites, do you think there's one mistake in the time for us?
For us.
What is it?
Yeah, there has to be. There has to be one mistake. Okay, we'll go through that. Yeah, we'll go through that.
Mistake.
Yeah. So we did, right? October 22, 1844. But there is a August 22, 1844. So there's pre-midnight. You know what?
Person.
There's pre-Sunday law too.
Midnight cry.
Then, there's pre-midnight cry and pre-Sunday law. Because there's a pre-midnight also. Right? This is very important because our fractals have to repeat. If this happens for the priest, then the same pattern also has to happen for the Levites. And the same pattern has to happen for the Nethinims also, right? Okay. All right. So, where was the mistake? If you put it here, where was the hand of God holding a mistake? Covering a mistake. Where was the mistake? Where are you going to put hand of God here?
April 3?
April 19.
April 19th, sorry, April 19th.
It's got to be April 19th, right? Right.
That's the
Right.
original.
Yeah, because the hand of God, they didn't realize that, they thought that Jesus was going to come here first, right? So when Jesus didn't come here, then they said, okay, there's a mistake. Then they realized there's a mistake. They didn't even know that there was a mistake, right? Only when they came to April 19 and they said, wait, you know what? Jesus didn't come. Then they realized, oh, you know what? There is a mistake. So they understand there is a mistake, right? So if you have to realize there's a mistake, and then the hand of God is going to be taken away from that mistake, right? To understand that, you have to realize that there's a mistake. How are you going to know that God is hiding a mistake yet if you don't even know there's a mistake, right? So they realize, oh, you know what? There's a mistake. So what is the mistake? See, April 19. It's only a few days later, from 19 to May 2nd, that he figured out, then he really made it on pre-midnight. So that then he can give the midnight cry message, right? So his mistake is right there, right? And then he can give the pre-midnight. When they realize there was a mistake, then they can correct it and give the pre-midnight. Okay. Right? The mistake, the hand was removed. I like to make those animations. Yeah.
Or maybe it would be because they thought he would come, so maybe the hand should be covering obviously.
Well, yeah, it's actually from here the mistake was removed here, but then
It was removed. Yeah.
right, yeah,
The hand was removed.
hand was removed. Starting at this point, then they started to realize what was happening, right? But
It was removed on the 2nd.
right, then their understanding became clearer, and then more clearer here, and then even Samuel Snow already knew it here, but a lot of people did not understand it. Only here was when that he gave it twice, then the people started to understand it, okay, about what's going to happen here, okay, all right. So, what about for us? Right? For us, in our time, when do we have to understand that there is a mistake? And when is our pre-midnight? Okay, all right. There's the 7.
Churches. 4 or 6 or 7 churches.
There's 7 churches, 7 seals.
This is the 7 seals, right?
7 seals.
The 7th seal. Because what was preached here was the 7 seals. It's an opening of what? Of an opening of things that are not known, right? Opening of secrets. Things are that not known. So an increase of knowledge. So you have an increase of knowledge. You have a continual increase of knowledge, right? So William Miller was preaching here. It was what was preached here was Daniel 8:14. Jesus is going to come. He's going to come at the end of 2,300 days. But they had to have an increase of knowledge all the way until they understood it here. Okay, so at midnight cry is when the 7th seal is open, because there's no more 7th seal. They completely fully understood it at the 7th seal. Okay, the 7th seal. All right, but to understand what happens at the midnight cry, you have to have a gradual understanding. Okay, so for what was first preached at the time of the end. Okay. So, all right, for us to know, as we near the close of world history, we have to know what was it that was preached in our time, starting at the time of the end. What was first preached? As we near the close of world history, the prophecies recorded by Daniel demand our special attention, as they relate to the very time in which we are living. With them should be linked the teachings of the last book of the New Testament scriptures. So Daniel has to be linked with Revelation. Satan has led many to believe that the prophetic portions of the writings of Daniel and of John the Revelator cannot be understood. But the promise is plain that special blessing will accompany the study of these prophecies. The wise shall understand. Was spoken of the visions of Daniel that were to be unsealed in the latter days, and of the revelation that Jesus Christ gave to his servant John for the guidance of God's people all through the centuries. The promise is, blessed he that readeth, and that they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein. Okay? Ellen White wrote in Prophets and Kings 5:47. The world is stirred with the spirit of war. The prophecy of the 11th chapter of Daniel has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. Soon the scenes of trouble spoken in these prophecies will take place. So you have to understand Daniel 11. What was first taught by those who were studying prophecy in 1989? You have to go back and ask, who were the first ones that was studying this? It's Pippinger. What did he first study in 1989? Daniel 8 and Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45.
That's applicable.
He was studying line upon line, and Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45. If you ask, Pippinger, what were you guys studying in 1989? They started studying Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45. And just before midnight cry, you have to understand the same message again. Just like William Miller. He was teaching about the 2300 days. Jesus will come. But that understanding did not fully come until the midnight cry. And that understanding was given eventually just before midnight. It was given at midnight. Midnight was given, Samuel Snow was preaching that message at midnight. But he understood that message before midnight, so that he can give that message at midnight. And then it will be understood at the midnight cry. Right? Right.
For the Levites.
For the Levites. Right. He had to be given, because then it'll become completely fulfilled. But he had to give that before midnight. There's a pre-midnight. Okay? And it's about the same. So if what happened during the Millerites happens in our time, it's also about Daniel 11. We have to know the complete understanding of Daniel 11. And it first started with Pippinger starting in 1989, starting about Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45. Now, just before midnight, we're finishing up with Daniel 11, verse 1 to 39, to complete the understanding of Daniel 11. So it falls perfectly that the fulfillment of Daniel 11, the complete understanding of Daniel 11, to prepare us for Daniel 12, is understood just before midnight. Yeah, right? So here, for us here, the seventh seal happens just before this understanding, right? Happens before, because our close of probation is at midnight. Remember? The seventh seal has to be opened not at midnight. It has to be opened before midnight. Right? At that time at the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass. This was studied in 1989. This was first studied in 1989 to understand that the time of the end, that the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen, that the papacy will be helped by America's ships and America's horsemen and chariots, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. And at that time, there was a mistake that was covered up. What was the mistake? Thinking that USSR is already toppled, and there was no more. The king of the South was gone. You thought that the king of the South was gone. In 1989, when they were studying this and forward, they thought that the king of the South was gone. Right? They thought the king of the South was gone. There's no more king of the South. So that's why you didn't understand Daniel 11, verse 1 to 39. Who's this king of the South that's keep fighting the king of the North? The king of the South is already gone. So we said, okay, it's only history. But how do you apply it in our time? The only way to understand it is because the king of the South is still there. Right? It's not gone. And how do we find that out? Through Daniel 11, verse 7. But out of a branch of a root shall one stand up in his estate, and which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress. So this is when into the fortress is when Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev. Now, this is when they need to understand this concept, because that is not Daniel 11 verse 70. This is when, not Ronald Reagan, sorry. This is when Napoleon and Berthier went, at the time of the end, went against the king of the South, pushed at the king of the South all the way into the fortress, all the way into the Vatican, right? At the time of the end. He shall enter into the fortress of the king of the North, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. So this is Napoleon and Berthier going all the way into the fortress, right? But when you compare that with Daniel 11 verse 10, and his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. See? Overflow and pass through. And then shall he return, and shall be stirred up even to his fortress. Now this means, this is the difference. He did not come into the fortress. So this is when Ronald Reagan and George Bush did not go all the way and conquer Russia. But they took away all the countries of the USSR, and the USSR fell, and all the other countries was freed from Russia. But Russia itself did not fall, because the sons only came up to his fortress.
They just stirred up.
Right.
Wait, so overflow and pass through, that would not be 1989?
Overflows and passed through the other countries. The other countries were overflowed and passed through. Right? It was the other countries that used to be part of USSR.
So even to his fortress is still 89?
No.
That would be Raffia.
No. This is 1989.
Sorry. Wait,
This is 1989.
Yeah, that's 1989.
Right?
Then
But the
where's-
1140 is birthday.
So this is, at the time of the end shall the king of the South push at him. This is Napoleon and Berthier.
79.
Right? And then the king of the North shall come against him. Now this is with the help of America in 1989.
1989.
Right. Now this is the papacy with America, with America's horsemen, ships, and chariots.
Yeah, that was 1989.
And shall enter into the countries. Now we thought that it was all the countries.
Oh, okay.
But it's also only the countries that was taken over and went to the west side. And basically went away from the USSR. Was taken away from the USSR. Right? Some of them joined with European Union. Right? Right.
Yeah.
Because they overflowed and passed over those countries. But it did not overflowed and pass over Russia. Russia still stood. Because they only went up to the fortress, not into the fortress.
So the USSR, what But the USSR fell.
USSR fell, but Russia did not.
But Russia.
Russia did not. That's why they're still the king of the south. And that was,
Where do you? Oh, okay.
and that's the mistake that was uncovered, right? So that was the mistake that was uncovered, right? Even to his fortress. Because when we understood that Russia was still there, and then now we can understand the rest of Daniel 11. Then now we can put all the whole picture together. Then we understood all the way to the end. Now the whole Daniel 11 is understood. And that is understood, that is the seventh seal being opened up. Daniel 11 being opened up to us is the seventh seal being opened up to us, right? Because at the beginning, it was only Daniel 11 verse 40 to 45. And all these understandings we had to put in little by little, line upon line, we put it all. But we didn't understand that Daniel 11 verse 1 to 39 fills up all the gaps, right?
The details.
Right. All the little details. And that is the final understanding.
So Daniel 11 verses 10 is saying it's predicting Penium?
No, it's predicting George Bush and Ronald Reagan passing through the countries of ex-USSR, but not going to the neck. Only going to the neck does not take over Russia, because Russia still stands, right? Then Daniel 11 verse 11, that's Raphia.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Like
Right.
What is the next step?
The next step is Raphia.
That's 11, verse 11.
11:11.
Oh, yeah.
11:11. Just remember, 11:11 is Raphia. But 11:10 is the mistake that was opened up.
Okay.
Yeah, because they all fill in the gaps of like 40, 44.
Right.
There's a little-
Everything.
1 to 39 is basically fills in all those little cracks.
All those gaps is
So
now
it's
filled
like-
up.
Verse 11. 10
It's
to
like it's explaining the end from the beginning.
That's right.
So it's like 1140 to 45, starting 89, and then
Right.
towards Sunday Law. But then from verse 1 to 39 is explaining everything
Right.
about 40 to 45.
Mhm.
But Daniel 11:7 is lined up also in Bernice's time, right?
Right. It's Bernice.
Bernice's brother is
Right.
revenged.
Yeah. And it also lines up with French Revolution.
Revolution.
So this is Bernice and General Dufault, right? With Bernice and General Dufault.
So then 41, when he says he shall enter into the glorious land, that's Sunday law.
That's Sunday law.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a big gap between 40 and 41.
Oh yeah, big gap. And how do you fill those up? We used to fill it up with all those verses that we studied from the rest of the Bible. But we cannot fill it up with anything from Daniel 11 because we didn't understand it, because there's a mistake. The mistake is we thought that there's no more king of the south.
Mm-hmm.
But then God's hands removed.
When God's hand was removed, we understand remove of Daniel 11:10. Daniel 11:10, the hand of God was removed from Daniel 11:10.
That's on December 2016.
December, yeah, just this past December. Right.
No, because like verses 1 to like 25-ish is all north versus south.
Yeah, it's all.
Essentially, so you just can't get rid of it. Like, where does it go? It's not just history.
So that way there's still king of the north going against king of the south. Who's the king of the south? Everybody's like, well, maybe Islam. Well, maybe this, maybe that, maybe everything.
They don't apply it to 40 to 45.
Yeah, the problem is that nobody had really understood. Nobody really
It's
understood.
left to be history.
Yeah.
It's Turkey.
Well, it's all kinds of things. Even king of the north, we don't even know who the king of the north is. Right? Okay. All right. So one more summary. Okay. Now put everything together.
Whoa.
Oh boy. So here is this is the Medo-Persian kings. Here's the Roman rulers, the Caesars, right? All the Caesars. Julius Caesar to Vespasian, Caesar Vespasian, all the way to Titus right here, right? That's William Miller. And with all of these put together, we understand now there's the pre-midnight. Who was the pre-midnight here? The time of Darius, predicting midnight was going to come, predicting that Ahasuerus and Haman and Mordecai, Haggai and Zechariah. Says, come out of Babylon. During the time of Darius, they say, come out of Babylon. Don't stay there because Haman is going to come during Xerxes' time. Right? It says, come out of Babylon. Haggai and Zechariah. And Haggai and Zechariah also predicted that the latter temple is more glorious than the former temple. Right? Talking about the church triumphant. Okay. Right. We'll go that in a little bit more. But who's the pre-midnight here? Agabus and Philip. Right? Agabus and Philip. And pre-midnight here is Samuel Snow, come to more understanding of what he is going to give at midnight. Right? So there's a pre-midnight here, pre-midnight here, pre-midnight here. Giving the understanding of what's going to happen here and what's going to happen here. Right? Even what's going to happen here. Obviously, what Samuel Snow was showing is what's going to happen here. Right? So all these understandings tell us what's going to happen here, here, and here. What we understand in pre-midnight. And based on what we all have been studying, is Daniel 11. The complete understanding of Daniel 11 is completed here. In preparation for giving the midnight cry at midnight.
And the 7 seals is open.
Yeah, the 7 seals have been open all the way until here, and the 7th one is right here. Mm-hmm.
So the line of Julius and Vespasian, that was from Tabo, right?
Oh yeah, all of this is from Tabo.
That's only like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
The Vespasian.
Right. But the things that we also understood is there's this August 8th and August 22.
Yeah.
And that's a pre-midnight cry, and this is a pre-Sunday law.
That's the one Tabo didn't get, right?
Yeah. He didn't do that. We were, you read some more and you find out these little more details, because it only makes sense that the fractal for the priest repeats with the fractal of the Levites and repeats with the fractal for the Nathanims, right? Yeah. Okay. And that is a more sure word of prophecy.